Haruhi,
Yeah?
so you're a...
Exploring the pros and cons of subtitles versus dubbing?
Yeah.
English subtitling, or subbing as most people know it, has been a gateway for many mono-linguistic viewers into the world of Japanese animation. Alongside subbing came dubbing, wherein voice actors redo the original voice work in a particular language. This work is not, however, a simple copy-paste translation. The works dubbed in can be altered to fit the motion of the mouth, or in order for a topic to be more understandable to a particular cultural audience.
You guys better watch yourselves out there. Don't give any sweets to Honey-senpai, no matter what tricks he resorts to. Oh, and incidentally, those instructions don't come from... Oh, hello, they do come from Mori-senpai, rather. Not me at all, really. I am walking away now. Goodbye. Thank you. Nothing to...
So that clip you just saw was of J. Michael Tatum doing his line readings for the 2000s anime Ouran High School Host Club. But what can be lost or gained when comparing dubbed and subtitled versions of a show? Gender identity is a central standing point in Ouran High School Host Club, and so to narrow down the topic of what these two forms of translation can offer, I'm going to look at what insight a viewer can gain or lose depending on which version of Ouran they choose to watch. Meet Haruhi Fujioka, the central protagonist and the character I'll be first looking at. Haruhi is a character who doesn't regard gender as being very important. When we compare the subbed and dubbed translations initially, the two seem very similar.
Haruhi?
Why should I care about appearances and labels anyway? I mean, all that really matters is what's on the inside, right? I don't understand why you even have a host club like this.
It's a cruel reality, isn't it?
男とか女とか外見とか人間大切なのは中身でしょなんでこんな部があるのかもさっぱりだ
This may lead one to favour subtitles, and they do have many advantages. It allows one to hear the original performances as they were intended, provides extremely accurate translation most of the time, and it allows for accessibility to deaf people. Not to mention, it's far cheaper than paying voice actors to dub over your work. Also, inaccurate translations and bad dubbing can severely harm the film's original meaning, on the one hand, and it can lead to a character's characterization being modified. However, it is not without its flaws. Japanese is a language in which pronouns are used less frequently than in many other languages. Therefore, when Japanese personal pronouns are used, they're often highly specific honorifics. Pronoun choice depends on the speaker's social status, as compared to the listener's, as well as the sentence's subjects and objects. In this way, the subtitled version fails to capture the gender-neutral nature of Haruhi, as it maintains the use of feminized gendered honorifics. Take for example this scene, in which Honey refers to Haruhi as chan, a diminutive suffix which is in general used for children and teenage girls.
ねえはるちゃんは勇者なのすごいな勇者じゃなくて特待生って誰がはるちゃんだ
Adding to this, the Japanese version of the show nearly always uses female pronouns when referring to Haruhi, whereas in the dubbed version, the characters refer to Haruhi with male pronouns when they believe Haruhi is male or when talking to those who do. Let's look at this scene, in which Haruhi first meets the host club members.
Oh wow, it's a boy!
Hikaru, Kaoru, I believe this young man is in the same class as you, isn't he?
Yeah, but he's shy. He doesn't act very sociably, so we don't know much about him.
そんな言い方は失礼だぞ。オーランホスト部へようこそ。特待生さん。
Welcome to the Ouran Host Club, Mr. Honor Student.
Did you catch that?
Welcome
The
to
English
Ouran
dub
Host
has
Club,
Kyoya refer to
Mr.
Haruhi
Honor
pointedly as Mr. Honor Student, whereas the Japanese version's subtitles simply say Special Student. This is a pointed choice on the subtitle writer's part, as the suffix used in the Japanese version is the gender-neutral san, which is added to most names regardless of the person's gender. There was a choice made to forego gender in this translation. This is a key example of insight that can be gained by watching the English dub. The switching between he, she, and they pronouns throughout the show acts as a constant reminder to the audience of Haruhi's lack of defined gender identity. This may lead one to think that dubbing is superior to subtitling, however, dubbing is not without its flaws. Haruhi is not the only character who doesn't put much stock in gender. Her father, Ryoji Fujioka, is biologically a male, but dresses as a woman, and Ryoji Fujioka is an example of where dubbing stems so far from the source material, I would argue it denies the viewer insight rather than providing more. Here is the English dubbed explanation he provides.
She's not going through a rebellious phase. Listen, I hate to be the one to break it to you, buddy, but I have a feeling she didn't invite you to school with her because she's embarrassed her daddy's a tranny.
So I like to wear women's clothing. What's it matter? I'll never love anyone the way I loved Kotoko, and she never had a problem with it, so lay off, would ya?
Yet, the subtitled version is much truer to heart, i.e., as Kerry puts it, a literal translation. As an example of a more literal translation, here's how Haruhi's dad explains his gender and sexuality in the subtitled version of the show.
ハルシちゃんが反抗期？それは違うんじゃねえかお前。オカマの父ちゃんが恥ずかしくって参観日に読めなかっただけだろ。
言っとくけど、私はもともとバイなの。けども、コトコ以外は愛さないって決めたから、お店で働くのに受けがいいようにしてるだけ。
The dubbing hand waves away his sexuality and codifies him as a man and states that he simply likes to wear women's clothing. Dubbing has been used to modify the original narrative. The subtitles give the viewer insight into the cultural background of Okama bars. To note, this is another dated term. An Okama bar referred to here is a bar where the staff is predominantly homosexual. It can be understood as what is called a gay bar in Western countries, but a slight cultural difference is that cross-dressing is a far more prominent feature. In the Japanese version, Haruhi's father works at an Okama bar and has a feminine name he uses for his job, and whenever he appears in the show, Ranka, meaning orchid flower. The English dubbing completely cuts out his sexual identity. In the Japanese version, he very plainly states that he is bisexual.
ランカさんとは昔お店の仲間でいらっしゃったんだ。なんでお前が知ってるんだ。
As Daniel Thorea says in Dubbing and Censorship in the European distribution of Japanese animation, dubbing has been used as a tool to eliminate any reference to non-normative gender identities, as well as to minimize the sexual content of certain scenes in productions that, in Japan, were not aimed at children. So what is the answer? What is the best version to watch, sub or dub? Well, one type of anime isn't inherently better than the other. In fact, the whole argument of subbed versus dubbed is inherently misleading, as it implies the original wasn't dubbed. A more accurate term would be redubbing. Dubbing can be used to emphasize points about a character for an audience, like the way in which Haruhi's gender identity is much clearer to an English audience through the use of male pronouns and the lack of feminized suffixes. But dubbing can also hide aspects core to a character, like Ranka's sexuality. Subtitles are cheaper to make and can offer a more literal translation. They can even explain cultural references or jokes that the dub doesn't have time to explore, such as this moment in which Haruhi's gender is revealed in the Japanese version. The subtitles helpfully explain the symbols that appear on screen so an English audience can follow along.
Haruhi.
はい。
お前女なのか？
生物学上は一応。先輩たちが男と思っているなら別にそれでもいいかなと。どうも自分は男とか女の意識が人よりも低いらしくて。
But they too can hide aspects of character, like the subtitler's decision to use strictly female pronouns for Haruhi. Ultimately, it's up to the individual fan to decide which version they prefer.
Remember, you're welcome to visit us in Music Room 3 whenever you'd like to.
The Ouran House Club will be waiting for you.
And we want to thank you from the bottom of our hearts.
We'll see you then.